Following Congress's busy first week with President Trump back in office, I spoke over the weekend with House Speaker Mike Johnson for the latest edition of our weekend program called This Week on Capitol Hill. And we discussed several developments that we saw unfold last week. Among the topics was the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which passed the House last Thursday by a vote of 217 to 204, with only one Democrat joining the Republicans in support. The day before, the bill failed to advance in the Senate when none of the Democrats voted in favor. What does this tell us? When only one Democrat in Congress is willing to support a common sense bill that says you'll give aid to a child who survives abortion and is born alive? Well, this is how I got into that discussion with Speaker Johnson. Listen. Mr. Speaker, the House passed the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, and this is a big deal because they've been trying to do this for a long time, and it was blocked repeatedly. Now they had the opportunity, they passed it, but the Senate fell short when every Democrat in the chamber voted against it. Now, this is a bill that would simply say if a child survives an abortion, is born alive, that they should be given medical attention. What does this tell us about the state of our nation and, quite frankly, the Democratic Party?
Yeah, it tells you a lot about the Democratic Party. I mean, they're so wed to their positions, being against life, that they will take this vote. We only had one Democrat in the House voted with us. And think of it, Tony, and this is everybody needs to understand what this is. A child is born alive, a failed abortion attempt. There's an infant child lying there on the table, gasping for breath and crying. And they voted that child should not receive medical attention, life-saving attention. It's just stunning to us that they would do that. But that's how dug in they are on their pro-abortion strategy and their pro-abortion ideology. And they can't even acknowledge the humanity of a child that is actually born. I think there's going to be a lot to say about that in the days to come and in the 2026 midterm elections. I mean, people need to see elections really do have consequences. And you send someone to Washington who votes against the life-saving measures for an infant, it's really something. It's hard to get around.
I mean, I guess to be accurate, this shouldn't be described as abortion. It's really infanticide because you have a child who is alive and if you think about this, if you have someone that's on the street that is, gasping for air, having a heart attack, everyone's going to respond to try to help that individual. In fact, other lives are risked to help that individual. But here in this case, you have an entire party saying, let them die.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a political question. I mean, it's a question of basic humanity, like basic morality and ethics. And they could not bring themselves to vote the right way on that. It's really, to me, it's just almost hard to believe. But here it is again. We had the same bill in the last Congress, and almost every Democrat voted against it. This time, again, only one House Democrat voted to save the life of a child in that situation. And it's really shocking.
Speaking of the life issue, Mr. Speaker, this week President Trump issued pardons for nearly 24 pro-life activists who had been imprisoned by the Biden administration, the Department of Justice, under the Federal Access to Clinic Entrances Act, FACE Act, for simply, in some cases, you had grandmothers who were simply praying outside of these abortion clinics, and these were all nonviolent individuals. First off, I'm grateful that the president has done this, but it's shocking when we have to wait for an election to get justice for the American people.
It really is. In my prior life, before I get into politics, as you know, I was a constitutional law attorney and litigator and defended a lot of pro-life cases. And on occasion, in the state of Louisiana, where we're both from, someone would be arrested on a sidewalk for peacefully praying outside of an abortion clinic. But in this day and age, in this era now, under the Biden Department of Justice, we've talked about so many times how it was weaponized. They really did. They very aggressively prosecuted anyone who would get anywhere near a clinic just to peacefully pray, peacefully protest, clearly protected activity under the First Amendment. And they put all these people in jail. And finally, you have a new president who says enough already. And he pardoned them. And that was a really important step. This past week, we also had the March for Life. a great event to stand up for that freedom and for the sanctity of human life. And it's really never been more important than it is right now for all of us to speak with moral clarity and conviction and consistency about that issue. It is the foundational principle of America that we recognize the right to life as a self-evident truth. And we need this generation of Americans to see it the same way and to exercise those freedoms to talk about it.
Well, again, we are grateful and celebrate President Trump releasing these political prisoners, is what they were. But the underlying issue is the law, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, FACE, which was enacted back in the 1990s under Bill Clinton. Is there a chance that we're going to see many of these tools that have been used to weaponize government removed during this administration?
Yes, we're looking at all of that. And you've seen the flurry of executive orders to begin to attack this stuff. And we're going to have to codify a lot of these changes. So in the legislative arena here in the House and Senate, we'll be looking to fine tune the law to ensure that our most fundamental freedoms are protected. And that'll be an ongoing theme of this administration.
That was my conversation with House Speaker Mike Johnson on This Week on Capitol Hill. You can watch the entire program on the Stand Firm app.